Greetings, folks. Welcome to another episode of Campfire Stories. Gino here, your tour guide into the strange, the unknown, the terrifying. Tonight, I submit another story to the Grimm Society. The Lost Amazon Temple. Are some things best left undiscovered? Growing up, I was always a movie buff. But as I got older, I moved on from just enjoying watching movies to a deep interest in film production. When I was in high school, I created a social media channel that covered all the news, events, and social interactions that were going on at my school. After graduation, I attended Stanford University. Their film production school was pretty good, but the real reason I went to Stanford was Jennifer Stein. Jen was a girl that lived up the street from me. Growing up, I was always enthralled with her. Throughout high school, we had an on-again, off-again romance. She was brilliant and was obsessed with ancient history and archaeology. She graduated a year early and enrolled in Stanford's very prestigious School of Archaeology. When I graduated the next year, I followed her. While we were in college, we remained close. She had a dream of not just being a successful archaeologist, but being a face of archaeology. She dreamed of being one of those people you see in documentaries, exploring new discoveries and sharing them with the world. Following my first year in college, Jen and I hatched a great plan, a plan that would benefit both of us. Over the course of that first summer break, we embarked on an adventure. We traveled to Serpent Mound in southern Ohio and shot a documentary. Now, doing a documentary on Serpent Mound wasn't groundbreaking content. However, the combination of my filmmaking talents and expertise and her historic acumen and camera presence led to a phenomenal film. We would go on making these documentary films all the way through our college career. At one point, our projects caught the attention of a few professors in the history and archaeology department. They were quite impressed with our work, and in a short period of time, word spread to the other departments at the school. By my junior year, I was making enough money doing video and audio production, I was able to quit my regular job. My senior year, Jen was already in grad school, and she had built an outstanding reputation with her professors as well as fellow students. Even this early into her career, she was already highly respected in her field of study. As my graduation was approaching, a dramatic discovery was made, a temple deep in the Amazon rainforest. It bore no evidence of connection to known cultures in the region and was believed to potentially be much older than any other culture previously discovered on the continent. This discovery was groundbreaking, and Stanford was selected to conduct the first research expedition. Dr. Jonathan Jacobs was chosen to lead the expedition. He was a world-leading expert in ancient South American civilizations. Dr. Jacobs was familiar with the work Jen and I had done over the years and requested that we join the expedition with the intention of producing a documentary about any potential discoveries. This was an opportunity of a lifetime. Jen and I were on board. The team ended up being 20 of us. There was Dr. Jacobs, as well as 2 other professors from the school. There was Jen and I, an MD and medic, a security detail of 4 men. They struck me as military but didn't wear uniforms, and 9 grad students to assist with collection and processing of artifacts. After several weeks of training, we flew down to Brazil, and from the airport were airlifted by helicopter deep over the Amazon. The helicopters came to a stop and hovered there. We were told we had arrived at our destination, but we couldn't see anything. The canopy had to be hundreds of feet above the jungle floor. We were lowered to the ground by rope and harness. As I was lowered through the canopy, I was struck by absolute amazement. The view of the temple came into sight. It was a pyramid, somewhere around 150 feet high. After the 20 of us were all on the ground, our equipment and supplies were lowered in. The security team offloaded a big trunk. They began gearing up, and they were loaded. Rifles, sidearms, night vision, everything. The leader had a sat phone to call in for supplies or in case of an emergency. We spent the remainder of the day setting up camp. It was amazing to me how loud the jungle was, and as the sun went down, it almost seemed like it got louder, but that could have been my nerves too. We had a roaring fire, and everyone's spirits were high. Many of us seemed a little on edge, but we were all excited to get started in the morning. The strange sounds and environment, along with the heat and humidity, made it difficult to sleep that first night. Regardless, I was up and at it early. We had to blaze a trail a short way to the temple. As we approached the area around the pyramid, we encountered something quite strange. The pyramid itself was four-sided. I guesstimated each side to be about 250 feet. In what appeared to be a perfect circle around the pyramid, 10-foot tall stone pillars were arranged. Outside the circle was dense jungle. Inside the circle, there was no vegetation. The trees grew up from outside the circle inward to the center and created the canopy concealing the temple. When we saw this, one of the two security members told us to stop. He put on a gas mask and pulled out a handheld device. I just got a quick look at it, but it looked like maybe a Geiger counter and air sniffer. He entered the circle and scanned around. After a short bit, he took off the mask and waved us in. His partner pat me on the shoulder and said, "You can never be too safe." I had never been on an expedition like this before, but this all seemed a little odd to me. I mean, the air detector, sure, exploring ancient ruins and all, but a Geiger counter? Who were these guys? When we entered into the circle, we saw the other side of the pillars. On each of them were crudely carved reliefs of animals known to inhabit the Amazon. Each of them appeared to be in an aggressive posture, and all of them were facing in towards the temple. The pillars were pretty thoroughly eroded, but the areas around the carving seemed untouched by erosion. We approached the pyramid itself. It was in immaculate condition. This shouldn't be possible. There appeared to be an entrance that was partially blocked by an enormous stone slab. Half of the slab was crumbled. On the portion that was still intact, there were pictures carved into the rock. It kind of looked like a storyboard. Dr. Jacobs told Jen to stay and assist him, and told me to stay as well and document this. He sent the rest of the students to examine the pillars. The first image on the stone slab depicted a person standing in front of a pyramid. The second, many people in front of a pyramid. Next, they were entering the structure. Then many people fighting each other in front of a pyramid. The last one seemed to depict people fleeing from a pyramid and being attacked by all forms of jungle animals. The remainder of the day was spent doing an overview of the site and mapping objects of interest. Over dinner that evening, Dr. Jacobs went over assignments for the following day. Jen and I were so excited we were going into the temple with Dr. Jacobs. The security leader insisted one of his men accompany us, and one be posted outside. This seemed agreeable enough to Dr. Jacobs. The following day, we were up early and made our way to the temple. Everyone broke off into groups and began tending to their assignments. 4 of us entered the pyramid through the crumbling portion of the stone slab. The hallway inside was wide enough for us to walk 2 by 2. Dr. Jacobs and I were in the front. Jen and one of the security team members followed behind. It was amazing how perfect the stone blocks of the structure were. We proceeded cautiously and eventually came to a large room about 20 by 20. To the left was a corridor that descended down. The wall directly opposed to us was covered in strange writing. Dr. Jacobs was almost giddy with excitement. I've never encountered this language before. He was trying to decipher it and taking notes for quite some time. Even as a layman, I could tell whoever carved this was not the same people that carved the stones outside. This appeared to be a structured language that was somehow etched into the stone. The pillars and stones outside were crudely chiseled and contained no organized language, just images. Eventually, Dr. Jacobs told Jen to take full physical copies. He didn't want to rely solely on digital records. He then said that he and the security escort were going to continue, but not to take too long. They handed us a radio and descended down the declining tunnel. Jen unpacked her forensic kit and began making rubbings of the etched writing. After a short bit, we heard Dr. Jacobs' voice come in over the radio. "Jen, quickly, bring your friend. Just follow the corridor." We jumped up and began hastily making our way, flashlight beams dancing around on the walls. We could see ahead the tunnel turned, and there was a strange blue glow coming from around the corner. When we turned the corner, we could see what was making the blue glow. There was some sort of fungus that was covering the walls, and it was giving off this bioluminescent glow. Up ahead, we could see the other two. They were standing in the middle of a large circular room. In the center was a large pedestal, and upon it was an enormous rock. Not a carved stone, just a giant rock. The rock was covered in the fungus, and it looked like the fungus had grown from the rock to cover the walls, ceiling, and floor of the circular room. As we began to approach, suddenly large clouds of blue fog started to pour forth from the rock and all the fungus covering the room. Both men began coughing and hacking uncontrollably. They were running straight towards us. We grabbed them and helped them back out of the pyramid. When we got out to open air, they both collapsed on the ground. The medic ran over to check on them. Within about 30 minutes, their breathing returned to normal, and they appeared to be no worse for wear. We all made our way back to camp so the doctor could examine them. He agreed they seemed fine, but couldn't say for sure without proper diagnostic equipment. Regardless, we decided to call it a day. We were all in agreement no one should go back in there till we figured out what was going on. Over dinner, we discussed what had happened that day. Nobody had ever heard of anything like this. By the time we were done eating, both men looked flush. The doctor checked them, and they were both running a fever. He gave each of them some meds and said that if their situation wasn't improved by the morning, he was going to have to call this in. We all turned in early. That day had been exhausting, to say the least. The 3 other security members set up a watch order, and the rest of us fell asleep. Sometime during the night, I awoke to strange sounds. There was an odd gurgling sound and a dull splatting sound. I opened my eyes, and as my vision came into focus, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Dr. Jacobs was straddling one of the other researchers. He was strangling the man. Then I heard a crunch as his windpipe was crushed. From the other side of me, I heard that dull splat sound again. As I was scrambling to my feet, I looked in the direction of the sound and let out a terrified scream. The other man that went down into the temple with us was on top of one of his partners, bashing his head in with a rock. There was blood everywhere. Another of his team was on the ground next to him. It looked like his head was completely turned around backwards. When I screamed, everyone startled awake and scrambled to their feet. Now the entire camp was erupting in horrified screams. I looked back at Dr. Jacobs. He was charging at another member of our expedition. His face will haunt me for the rest of my life. It looked barely human, twisted with a bestial rage. He pounced on a young woman and bit her throat out. I heard 2 bursts of automatic weapon fire, and the 2 crazed men slumped to the ground. The sound was almost deafening. The muzzle flash lit up the surrounding jungle line, and by the light I could see all manners of jungle predators. An enormous jaguar leapt out on someone. The security captain, he yelled out, "Get to the clearing!" and began to fire at the approaching beasts. I grabbed Jen's arm and began sprinting down the jungle trail. I saw the captain grab the sat phone. He was a few paces in front of us. I could hear blood-curdling screams coming from the camp. From the front of us, the captain was yelling into the sat phone, "Bravo 47, code black!" Just as the words left his mouth, a tarantula the size of a lab tackled him to the ground. Terrified, we ran past him as he was yelling out in pain. As we ran down the jungle trail, it felt like the jungle itself was growing over the trail. We made it to the clearing and continued running till we got to the base of the pyramid. I turned, expecting the worst. But there was nothing behind us. We could hear rustling in the jungle all around outside the circle of pillars. There was no sleeping that night. When the sun finally rose, I was so exhausted I slept. I awoke a few hours later. Jen was sleeping. I checked on her. She was burning up. I felt like I was running a fever as well. There was no food or water, and Jen was unconscious, so I went back to sleep. I just felt so exhausted. I awoke, unable to breathe. I could feel hands around my throat. It was so dark. I couldn't see who was on top of me, but I could swear I heard a helicopter. Just before I began to black out, a spotlight shone on us. I could see that the person attacking me, it was Jess. She was leaning in, trying to bite my face. She had that same ferocious look that Dr. Jacobs had. As I slipped into unconsciousness, the last thing I remember is Jen's head exploding into a red mist and a loud report from the rifle. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. A nurse came running in rather quickly. She took my vitals, and every time I tried to ask questions, she just told me the doctor would be right in. The doctor came into the room and greeted me warmly. He informed me that I was in Atlanta at a CDC facility. I was told not to worry, but I had been in a coma for 8 months. All of us had been infected by fungal spores that attack the nervous system. He said that they wanted to keep me here for a few days for observation, and I agreed. On his way out of my room, he informed me that some people were going to be coming by to talk to me soon. I was starving, so I had a late meal. Needless to say, it didn't sit well. After all, I hadn't physically eaten in 8 months. I turned on the TV to see what I missed during my long nap. It seemed I really hadn't missed much. While I was catching up on the news, the nurse came in and informed me that my family had been contacted, and arrangements were being made for them to see me after my release. Unfortunately, they couldn't see me in the hospital. I was being treated in a secured medical facility in the CDC. She asked if I was ready to talk for a little while. There were some government agents that wanted to ask me some questions about my ordeal. I nodded, and she left the room. I was really nervous. I'd never been involved in anything like this before, and I knew some people were killed. The doctor entered the room with 2 men in suits. They showed identification and said they were with the NSA. I was told not to worry, I wasn't in any trouble. They just wanted some clarification on the events that transpired during our expedition. I told them the entire story. They interjected here or there for more details. When I finished, I asked about Jen. The NSA agents told me I was the only survivor. The doctor spoke up at this point. Said that I was very lucky. My immune system seemed to have a natural resistance to the infection. I asked about all the strange occurrences. The doctor informed me the spores attack the nervous system and shut down higher brain function. The symptoms seemed to include hallucination, paranoia, and eventual animalistic behavior. As far as the animal attack, the Amazon is a dangerous place. Animals attacking humans isn't uncommon. When we concluded, the agents informed me that due to the fact that my rescue was a joint operation between the military and the CDC in foreign territory, the whole expedition was classified. There would be consequences if I ever disclosed any details of my time in the Amazon. A few days later, I was released. Over the next several months, I tried to get back to a normal life, but those events haunt my dreams to this day. About 6 months after I awoke from my coma, I came home to an envelope slid under my door. Inside was a typed letter. It read, "I thought you should know. Your coma was medically induced. They experimented on you. They weaponized it and used your antibodies to develop a vaccine and cure. Do not try to find or contact me. It wouldn't be safe for either of us." Along with the letter were several photos, many of me unconscious as a blue, glowing fungus gradually overtook my body and then seemed to vanish. The final photo was of a small, rustic village somewhere. All of the people were dead and covered in the fungus, and it was spreading and overtaking the village. After seeing this, I had to speak out, regardless of the consequences. Hey folks, thanks for listening to the end. If you liked the story, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to join the Grimm Society, hit that subscribe button. If you have any stories to share, you can submit them to dubrothersgrimm@gmail.com.